Welcome back to another episode of the Choose Your Nature podcast, where we adventure with entrepreneurs, innovators, and local legends. We are the salty dogs bonded together by a passion for the great outdoors, the chaos of building something impactful, and choosing our nature. I'm your host, Kurt Tobias, founder and president of Tuna. Go ahead and hit subscribe below so you don't miss future episodes that will inspire you to choose your nature. All right. We're back here on another episode of the Choose Your Nature podcast, and we're with Steven Vanden Heuvel. What's up, buddy?
How's it going, everybody?
All right, so we're going to dive into Steven's story. We're going to dive into what he does, who Steven is to me personally. But before we start that, we're going to play a little game. And I'm going to give you a short description of something. And this game is to show our audience some of the experiences that we've had together and some adventures that we've been on. So I'm going to give you a short description, and you have to give me a one-word answer. And out of that, we're going to pick one story, and we're just going to dive into it and just talk about it. So the first description that you have to define in one word is Hawaiian roll.
I would define that as pooping.
Okay. Blind date.
Chipotle.
Alice in Wonderland.
Party.
And the last one we'll do is tight pants.
Redfish.
All right, so out of those four, which story do you want to dive into?
Man, we have to dive into the Hawaiian rolls. There's literally no other story that we can talk about that would even remotely touch the essence of what a Hawaiian roll means to us.
Yeah, so just give us a quick imagery of what took place in this this historic scene.
Honestly, I gotta just go through what was in my mind at the time. Paint you guys a picture. You know, we're in the Florida Keys, specifically Isla Morada, and we're island hopping, and we're definitely miles away from any form of restroom. Let's just say that. And there's also there's an evacuation order happening in my bowels. Wow, I was miles away from any place to evacuate, and so we were hanging out on the skiff, and I just asked Kurt. I said, "Hey, do you have any toilet paper on the boat? Because you know what, like." Keep some TP on the boat, and you just never know when nature's going to call. It's like you're choosing your nature, but nature's calling as well.
Sometimes it chooses you.
It does. It chooses you, and you cannot stop it from happening.
You can't.
So I started prowling around the boat, looking for something that would that I could use. And for toilet paper, and the only thing you could find is I opened the cooler, and it was kind of like this light bulb moment went off in my head, where there was Hawaiian rolls that had been sitting in there for 2 days. Half of them were in the water, half of them were out. So you kind of got like, I started thinking to myself how perfect this was. You kind of got like the wet wipe side and the dry wipe side. So I'm like. But like I actually thought to myself, I'm like, no, I probably can hold this. Like you always have that courage immediately, and your body like recorrects you in that moment. And so, in just a strong moment, I had to do my business while holding onto the polling platform, and it was a perfect extension, probably exactly how our ancestors had done it in the past.
Liver King would have approved of that.
Exactly.
It was very ancestral.
So, and then what had actually happened was the Hawaiian roll had a sacrifice. They sacrificed themselves for the sake of a clean booty. And,
It did.
And we let them kind of like, it's kind of cool because, you know, when you get done, you throw them off the boat. And they float behind the boat.
It's, I mean, just think about, it's biodegradable. You've got fish. Fish can feed on it. I mean, we're just really giving back.
And if the imagery that sticks in my head is like, you guys have always seen these like daisy chaining tarpon. This was daisy chained
Hawaiian rolls.
Like, that's all I could think about as I watched them float off.
Not many people can say they've experienced that. A lot of people can say they've experienced daisy chain tarpon. Not many can say they've seen a daisy chain of Hawaiian rolls.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say now the legacy has been set.
It has.
Every time I go to the grocery store, the Hawaiian rolls stand out. It's like, you know what? If there's ever another TP shortage, like, I know where I'm picking up.
Exactly.
There's going to be a Hawaiian roll shortage at the same Publix that I go to.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think you did a fabulous job giving us the imagery of what that actually looked like, the before and after. And I'd just like to say, like, Dude Wipes has nothing on Hawaiian rolls. I mean, they're singular purpose. I mean, it's just a wet wipe. You know, I think you hit it on the head. Is you got the moisture side, and then you got a dry side. I mean, you only went through like 2 or 3 Hawaiian rolls. So
it was perfect.
It was definitely perfect. So anyways, well, we hope you guys enjoyed that story as much as we did in that moment. That was top 3 best laughs of 2022 for me. There's not a day that I walk into Publix or any other place. I go into a party, a cookout, and I see Hawaiian rolls, and I don't send a picture to Steven. So, yeah, we hope that everyone finds a moment like that in life where they can just look back forever and just be reminded of something silly like that. So,
I'm very excited to tell my children that story.
Yeah. All right, so now we're going to talk about how you and I know each other, and then we're going to dive into Sword's story. So why don't you give us a quick 2-minute overview of how you and I met. There's a funny story there. So, and then just talk about what the last 2 years have looked like of us getting to know each other. You can talk about our Bible study that we started. You can talk about how you and I meet up and fish and do things in the outdoors, and how we always are brainstorming on the next big idea for both brands. So just give us a quick overview of how we met, and then we'll dive into Sword after that.
Yeah, so when I had first moved back here as well, I had started a business, but I was working out of the Starbucks because much better than getting free Wi-Fi and a $5 coffee. I mean, I kind of consider the coffee to be my rent. So I paid my rent, got my coffee, and I was sitting down at one of those, round tables against the wall that, most Starbucks have these days. And there was this really attractive girl with a big diamond ring on her finger that was sitting next to me. And me being single at the time, I was like, you always, like, you get to that age, you got to check their hands, make sure that, like, is there a ring on there or not. And there was a ring on there, so you know what? Tuck my tail, just do my work. But about 5-10 minutes into getting started on work, this really attractive girl approached me, and she kind of stumbled and stuttered a little bit, and it was like what she ended up getting out was, "I love you." No, I'm just kidding. She started coming and she said, like, "Hey, like, I have a husband who's also trying to start a business right now, and I actually think you guys would be best friends." And I was like, "Sure, I'm all for that." Like, I mean, if he's got a hot wife, like, he definitely is a good dude. Like, So
I don't actually know if I would use that as a ruler of how people actually are. If I see an attractive woman, I actually think probably the opposite in most cases. I'm like, it's probably some sleaze bag that has like a ton of money. In this case, that was clearly not the case.
clearly not the case.
Yeah.
So we were definitely we were destined for success after that initial meetup. But Kurt and I got set up on a blind date, and we went and had some Chipotle together, and then the rest was history. It's trying to like you find a guy you like. It's rare in this day and age to like find people that like you actually click with.
Yeah.
We usually keep all these relationships on like a surface level, but I do remember that first time we ever got dinner together. It was pretty much like, hey, like you're a bro.
Yeah.
And we had like really intentional conversation that was like, all right, let's just continue to grow this relationship, and it flourished over the last 3 years, and we've been able to start a really good start out as a little men's group, turn into a phone call, and now we have a full-on Bible study that we have the opportunity to teach people about who Jesus is, and the relationship that we have with him, and how he's changed our own life.
Yeah.
That's something incredible that Kurt and I have been able to start and work on over the last 3 years since we met.
Yeah. You mentioned something about like you come across these people in life, and kind of like that light bulb moment happens where you're like, I think we like kind of connect well. And like we live in an area right now where there's so many young people moving here and so many fun young people. And I feel like that thought comes across a lot, but there is always, we know that person, like when whoever's listening to this right now, like when you said that, like they thought of one person or two people. They're like, when I met them, I knew immediately like there was something special there. And for me personally, that came at a time that was like so critical. We just moved down here. Like you said, you moved back from New York at the time. And we had no one. Like we had just started to talk to a few different people, but like nothing was clicking. Like it just seemed like we were on this little island, but like we loved the area. We loved like, hey, this is fun. We're at the beach, we're on the water, and we were still, that was like year 2 or 3 of marriage. Hence why Lindsay was already shopping around again. I mean, she was looking, she liked what she saw, and I don't blame her, honestly. So anyways, for what it's worth.
She came across strong.
Yeah.
Let's just say that.
Full disclaimer for people that don't know, we are being totally sarcastic. Lindsay and I have a great marriage, so yeah. Anyways, since then, just to keep things on a personal level, and then we'll dive into business. Talk about you recently just put a ring on your finger. Talk about that story and how you and Vic met and how that's impacted you guys personally. And then I think that'll be a good transition, and we'll start talking about like all the stepping stones of Sword and that journey and kind of the detachment from the corporate realm to entrepreneurship.
Yeah, we when I moved here 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago, I was in just a weird place in my life where I was coming out of like a season of just depression and a season where I chased money and fame and fortune. I chased status, and honestly, I had it all. I had everything and more that I wanted in New York, but that had been the most empty that I'd ever felt in my life. So that's when I moved back here, and that was the same time that I met Kurt. And for about a year, 2 years, I just started to come out of that season and into the season of like, you know what, I think I'm ready to like find a wife and settle down and start seriously dating. And that's when Vic came along, and she Victoria, my wife, actually moved here for a job, and we got connected through 2 mutual friends.
Yeah.
But the funny story is that before she moved here, my uncle or my godfather, her uncle and my godfather had sent me a picture of her, and I'm thinking like, of course she's beautiful, but like Florida's a big state. Like she's just moving to Florida. I mean, for all I know, it's probably Miami or
exactly,
or it's Tampa.
Probably not Santa Rosa Beach.
Exactly. So like, I'm just like, oh sure, whatever. Like, I didn't think too much of it, and then I was browsing Hinge one day, and she popped up, and I'm like, oh, like why is I guess she moved to Rosemary Beach. And so I sent my my godfather and her uncle a text back, and I was like, hey, like, can you send me that girl's number? And so we went out to lunch, and we really clicked over, a lot of similarities and commonalities of just the way we thought about life, just our maturity with Jesus, and kind of a lot of things that just like the check boxes were there, and now it's just all about like figuring out how to grow a relationship.
Yeah.
And so we dated for 14 months and got engaged, and we just recently got married 2 months ago in the most gorgeous location on earth in Utah, and right outside of Park City. And we decided to have a small wedding with just a few people, our closest and tightest people in our circle, and that's kind of had a blast doing it.
Yeah. So, kind of a little bit deeper dive, real quick. At what point? Because you're talking about like you're kind of bouncing out of this season of like, hey, I feel like I'm rebuilding a foundation. A couple things that happened in your life at that point that were kind of putting some cracks in the foundation, and you're going out and you're like, hey, I'm going to kind of go pour a new slab or fill some cracks. At what point when you were going out, whether it was business or other relationships, but like specifically for Vic, like at what point were you like, hey, I know this is the girl that God put in my life to be with forever? Like, at what point was it? Immediately? Was it was it like a couple dates in, and do you think that she would answer the same way that you do?
It's kind of funny because we that first week we met, we went to lunch. Lunch was incredible. I was like, you know what, this is a girl who I could really see life with. But obviously, you can't make or break a decision in the very, very first date. But it's like, hey, I see a lot of potential and a lot of just the things that like really attracted me to her, like her personality, the way she talks, the way she's kind to people, her passion for life, and her zest for just being funny and goofy. And then that whole week we hung out again. We went to lunch on a Tuesday, hung out again on Friday, and she actually had to move apartment. And so on that Saturday morning when we moved apartment after our date on Friday, we just sat on the bed and we just started talking. And it was kind of like a week of we went through that whole week, and then we just kind of ran through a checklist of things that like were important to talk about. And at that point in time, like I knew like I had found something special. And reality is like I didn't want to ruin it. And I think I tried a lot. I tried too hard to like not ruin it, but I knew as I going forward to like know like, hey, do we want to put a ring on her finger? That was just a God thing, really. And I had gone through a bunch of struggles in my life where committing is a more difficult decision than most. And so I knew that like I wanted to commit to her, and it was kind of like a leap of faith, and just say like, hey, like here's everything about this girl who's absolutely incredible, and like if it's anything the problem, it's probably me.
Yeah, that's a good mindset. I mean, I feel like you and I talk about everything. So if like people haven't gathered this at this point, Steven will be one of my best friends for the rest of our lives. You're not just a friend to me, you're a brother. Like, I mean, I said this to you last week, I think. I said there's two people in my life right now that have the full right to speak anything towards me. Two men. And it would be you and Patrick. And like the reason why we say that is because we hold each other accountable. We have intentional meetings multiple times a week, whether it's text, whether it's phone, whether it's in person. And we're keeping all these things in check because we're not directly hitting this topic on the head, but essentially, like, we live in a very distracted culture. Like, if we all of a sudden stop prioritizing the way that we treat our wives, the way that we prioritize our wives, then all of a sudden we're finding a discontentment roll in. If we stop prioritizing our businesses, there's a discontentment that rolls in. We start looking at, well, maybe I'm not fully investing anymore. Relationships, all those things. And that's just a mindset. Like, I find it very hard that you can be, like, insanely good at your marriage, but then you're, like, horrible at other things. You know what I mean? Like, if your mindset is like that person's hungry to change everything. And, like, you have inspired me so much in that realm, from the way that you're scheduling to different things, and that challenges me in ways I'm like, and that's ultimately, like, what we should be striving for. We should surround ourselves with people that are continually pushing us to the next level and pushing us to be this better version for the people around us. It's not better yourselves, better this. Like, that's what culture's telling us. And, like, we're the most unhappy we've ever been, you know, because it's look at me, look at me, look at me. So, real quick, before we transition into strictly kind of talking about sort of the development there, what is one thing that, it doesn't have to be one thing, what is something that Vic does that inspires you? Like, that really just pushed it to the next level. Like, because for me, when I see Lindsay's work ethic, I see the way that she continually pushes herself to the next level. And, like, a lot of people say that flippantly. Like, if you know Lindsay or know anything about her, like, you're like, it's impossible not to see her and not be inspired. So, like, what is something that Vic, in your life, like, you see that and you're just like, gosh, like, that's such an attractive piece because it pushes me to then be able to come back around and actually, like, fill her cup back up.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I really admire about Vic is just her heart towards other people.
Yeah.
Like, she's someone that doesn't dive, like, she doesn't dip her toe in and think that, like, hey, like, I just want to have a little relationship and then, you know, dip her toe back out whenever it's convenient. She's somebody that, when it comes to relationship and friendship, it's all or nothing. So,
Yeah.
I mean, she truly makes, like, a full dive into people, and she loves them, like, on the deepest level, like, I've ever even imagined. I mean, she's so loyal and honest and just transparent in all of her relationships, and that's something that, you know, just inspires me to continue. Like, when I go and approach somebody, you know, I think of, like, you know, maybe there's a business deal, or maybe there's, like, a, you know, there's a way, like, a way out, or maybe there's a transaction. But, like, Vic continually shows me that, like, hey, these people are human. Like, they're human beings, and that's kind of, like, the one thing that I look up to her the most.
For a second there, it sounded like you were about to say look up her skirt, but all right, so we're gonna cut that out. But I just yeah.
Look up her skirt.
The one thing that makes me want to look up her skirt the most. I don't know. We might leave it in. You never know. All right, so we kind of talked about our story, talked about you and Vic. It's just all these big chapters in your life right now. Now let's dive into, like, some real juicy stuff, which is, like, this transition. And this is a real hot topic these days, but this transition from the corporate realm to entrepreneurship. And, like, that word just gets, like, flippantly thrown around these days. They're just like, I'm an entrepreneur. Like, but it's like, what does that mean to you, one, and then two, like, what was that journey actually like? Like, because that's what we connected on, was this immediately like, hey, you just left? Like, I'm trying to leave. Like, I'm trying to leave this prison cell. But what gave you the courage to do it? And, like, what are your dreams? What are your aspirations? And why did you feel so confident that you could do that? So, just, like, give an overview on that whole transition.
So, I worked. So when I moved to New York City after I graduated from college, while I was there, my dad got sick and then passed away from a brain tumor. And in this process of coming back home to spend time with him while he was sick and then going back to New York, it's kind of like, why was I going back to New York? There was there's always this thought of like, because you're coming home and I was coming home to Florida and seeing my dad and like riding with my dad and like taking him everywhere, to all of his like doctor's appointments and therapy appointments. And one thing he said to me in the car one day, he was like, hey, I worked my entire life only to start living the last 6 when he retired. And that moment, that sentence struck a chord with me because, a guy who, he lived this incredible life and did like all the most incredible things. And for him to say like, hey, like I've only lived the last 6, I was kind of like, okay, what can I do that's truly living and life-giving, and knowing that I don't want to reach, like, we're never promised tomorrow. And I had to learn that lesson very, very quickly when my dad got sick. And so I was in New York still after he passed away, and I knew that like I wanted to start a business, but I also knew that like you can just get up and you can go start a business, but you still need to like have some kind of base understanding of like what you were doing.
Yeah.
And so I just every single weekend I would just learn. And one thing I did in my free time was like I literally sat at the coffee shop and I like brainstormed business plans, and I would come up with a 10-page business plan that was, here's the money I needed, here's the cash flow that it would take, here's what all the different steps it would take to get there. And I failed on a couple of business ideas when I was in New York, but I don't think I fully understood the nature of like, you really need to be ingrained and deep. You just have to make the leap, and you have faith that God got a plan for you, and that He is taking you down a journey, and like let Him take you down that journey. And it wasn't until like I left New York, I was like, I took probably 2-3 months off of just everything. I did the minimum that I had to do. I kept my job in New York, but I did remote work. But I just got by with like the minimum that I could do, and I just kind of got my mind right. And I kept thinking to myself, like, what's something that I can realistically start right now, get it to the market as fast as possible, and for as little money as I needed to invest in it to see if I would have a business. And so I started Sword, and I came out with one product, and my first product was actually a fillet knife. And the fillet knife was, I told myself I could sell enough of one fillet knife, then I'd be good. I'd have a business. And in that first year, I launched my fillet knife the 2 weeks after COVID shut the country down, and I still sold $50,000 worth of one knife. And I was like, all right, well, I've got a business.
People are getting weapons, dude. It wasn't for fish. It was weapons.
Yeah, I think they were about to fight somebody with them.
Bayonets.
And so one thing that I learned in New York was that, like, the corporate mindset is like, they pay you a salary to give up what you truly dream about.
Yeah.
And that salary really is nice. Like, it is comfortable, and like if I was sitting here telling you that entrepreneurship was this incredible thing, and like there was nothing wrong, like I'd be lying to you. In fact, my wife and I, we sat down a couple nights ago, and I had a moment of like, hey, for 3 years, like I haven't gotten a paycheck, and that's what the majority of America goes through.
Mm-hmm.
Like, every 2 weeks, money shows up in their account, and but there's a lot of people out there who are unhappy, and they're not excited to wake up in the morning and go to work. But like, I can give you a honest, full transparency feedback that like I have woken up every day and I've never felt like I was actually going to work, because it's just this life-giving thing and it's not for everybody. Like, if every single person was an entrepreneur, like we wouldn't have anybody that could run a business. So that's kind of the transition was like, hey, I want to start a business, but I had got some experience under my belt first, and then there was just a life-changing moment that I was like, you know what, it's now or never, and just bit the bullet and did it.
That's good. You made a ton of really good points. I think it's really easy for us to, in the context of this podcast, it's really easy to just beat down the corporate realm. But what is something that you took away, that you learned from corporate America? Because like I have my laundry list of reasons why I hate it, but there is a short list of, you know what, it taught me, like it got me where I'm at now. Though it was a stepping stone, and it was a painful 8 years. But like, what is something that you learned from the corporate? I'm not saying like, hey, I learned how to like really work some spreadsheets, but I mean like a mindset shift.
I did learn how to work some spreadsheets, though. I'll tell you that.
He is known for being a freak in the sheets, is what I hear from
some employees of mine. But
even then,
Google Sheets, guys.
Google Sheets, yeah. Just keep it G. So like, what was, and I'm talking mindset stuff.
And I think with the one thing that the corporate realm really does teach you well is structure.
So I was gonna say, yeah.
Like there is a method to the madness.
Yeah.
And because whether you're making $200,000 a year, or whether you're making $200 million a year, like there still has to be some kind of structure, or else like you don't really have a business.
Right.
It's something that I really try to hammer down and talk to my employees about. And as I grow my business, is there are very nitty-gritty numbers that when they make sense, like you can take a business from 200 to 2 million, because like those numbers are still gonna matter doesn't matter how much money you make. And for us, it's like customer acquisition cost or lifetime value of a customer. Like a lot of those things are things that like the corporation like really drills into your head, because they got there. They made it. They made it to billions of dollars in revenue, and like they didn't get there from being this dumb big beast. Like they got there from being smart, educated, and like making logical decisions. And I've had to like take that knowledge of being like, you know what, I'm blazing my own trail, but like, wait, there is a trail that's been blazed. Like we might as well like follow that until like, all right, what's the point of like branching off after that?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for there's no one size fits all, but there's definitely formulas that we can start at. And I have found even recently that there's been a lot of like dysfunction because there's so many moving parts in a consumer goods brand. And recently I've made some lifestyle changes to actually go back to what I used to have in the corporate realm. Like I actually dress to the occasion. So even if I only have like a couple Zoom calls for the day, like I will dress up for that. Not like a button up by any means, but like I don't roll out of bed and like don't comb my hair and like just roll up to the computer and just start like drooling on it and spilling coffee. Like I get up, I get prepared, I make sure I look presentable from the stance of I don't want to like treat it as if I'm the only one caring about this thing. And so like that's kind of hardwired. Like everyone that goes to a job, so the other side of that is I used to hate the fact that you would go in as like as soon as you would swipe that badge to get into the building, or for ours there's like a clearance to get in, but like as soon as you swipe that badge, it was almost like you put this different persona on. I'm no longer Kurt. Like I'm this corporate Kurt. And
you're actually Curtis.
Yeah, I'm now Curtis. And I hated that. I hated the way that everyone talks differently. It's like they all feel like scared the whole time, because you are. Because like there's someone's like kind of like dangling your life. Like you're like basically a pup in a lot of these cases. And again, like not every corporation is like that. There's a lot of really good corporations. I'm just generalizing. And I think that's resounding data to support that. Is a lot of people feel like I go into a swimming lane and then like all of a sudden like 20 years just went by and I feel like I didn't live it. And you talked about like you wake up every day. Like, dude, I was up till 2 a.m. last night getting stuff ready. Like people think, oh, it's just this sexy lifestyle. You drive around sports cars. Like, no, like you're scraping by, but you're scraping by understanding and feeling every single heartbeat. Like you're not falling into this monotonous routine of I'm now like in this basically on this hamster wheel, and there's like when does it end? Like there's something new every day for us, and I think that's what makes it fresh, is because you're like, oh, like well I have to get that done, but like here's 10 other things I have to do too. And so so we talked about the benefits of the corporate realm. What is the kind of the biggest driver that like was like that's my non-negotiable, like I'm done with this whole realm? And that was like really the straw that broke the camel's back for you.
Yeah, for me it's bureaucracy really is what it's what just kills me. I remember going into meetings and it was never about like, hey, how do we make this company better? It was like who was going to get the credit.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, why? Like, why does that even matter? Like, we're here to make the company better, but it was all this like what a lot of people call the race to the top.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, like I saw it as like this race to the bottom, because why aren't we putting the company's best interest first versus like who's actually going to get the credit? Well, you know what? If everybody starts to like take ownership, then we all get the credit. It's not just put on one person, which typically that's what it was. You got a bunch of lower level guys who are very sharp, making great decisions, and the guy at the top is taking all the credit for it.
Yeah.
And granted, it's great, but like if you had a more flat organization, and if you look at some corporations out there that have a very flat organization, like those are the ones you actually want to work for.
Yeah.
But I unfortunately did not work for one of those.
Yeah. I often think from the mindset of, like how can you control culture once it gets to a certain size? So I have no problem with the overall corporate structure, but I fail to see how they can maintain a healthy culture. A culture meaning like they truly value their employees. The biggest thing that kills me is contradiction. When I see a company spend millions of dollars about how they want to take care of their employees, but they literally could care less about them. They work them to death. Our health in America is just plummeting from like stress levels, lifestyle. Again, not every corporation, generalizing here, but like what is your take on that? Obviously you have goals for growing Sword to 10, 20, 30 employees one day, at the least probably. What is something that you are already preparing to do that is going to differentiate Sword from another corporate model?
Like something that we focus on, being a consumer brand, is somebody has to have like the initial passion before you even hire them.
Yeah.
Like they need to be passionate about for Sword specifically, like they need to be passionate about being outside. They need to be passionate about like spending time on the water. It doesn't have to be like that they are just like already crazy about saltwater fishing and like they are ready to go every single day of their lives. Like, but if they don't have any of those things, like any tangible passion for like just like living this life outside, I've learned that is like the first thing that I screen for. Because what I've found is that over time, like you'll find that your employees will actually resent you for like what the company has been built for.
Yeah.
Where it's like, our company is built for the crazy one. And when we think about someone who's crazy about fishing, is like someone who's like, it's not like a hobby anymore.
Yeah.
It's part of who we are. It's part of our life. And if you hire somebody who doesn't really believe that or doesn't really have the passion for that, they're only really coming to work for a paycheck. It's a whole difference between like you have a missionary that's working for you, or you just have a mercenary, like somebody who's just coming out there to like getting paid to do something.
Well put. So which one are you hiring? If you've got to pick one or the other, passion over talent, missionary over mercenary?
We're definitely picking the missionary. We're picking somebody who has the passion because I am a firm believer. Like don't get me wrong. I love the education system, but like I'm a firm believer in this day and age. Like if you have the passion, you can teach yourself how to do anything that's in relation to like a consumer brand or consumer business. There's tools, there's webinars, there's seminars, there's pretty much the sky's the limit. I mean, even Harvard has classes online about certain things that are totally free for the public.
Oh yeah.
And that's like, if someone has a passion, you can teach them. Whatever it is that they need to know, or you know what, they'll teach themselves.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. I mean, like, that's a whole nother can of worms that we could do a whole podcast on itself. But like, everyone's, I don't have this. I don't have the right tools. We have free libraries with internet and computers there, and just about every university out there puts classes online for free. You can actually go and attend a lot of university classes. You won't get credit for it. You can go sit in on the classes. So it really comes down to this, like, again, this idea of like, I'm doing this for a sheet of paper, or I'm doing this for actual knowledge that I can take and apply. And I think that in general, like our education system it's conditioning people to then be reliant on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, versus this mindset shift turns into, I have to treat it like no one's going to come save me. And I'm going to approach every single decision like that. And when you have that mindset, you then start to value people very highly. Like you don't have the luxury. I'm not actually crying. It's just the wind is blowing right in my eyes. It's a very emotional scene here. You don't have the luxury of saying, you know what, screw Billy Bob. Like, I never liked that guy, and he sits 2 cubicles down from me. You know what, I just kind of treat him like crap. I treat some of my customers like crap. You don't have that luxury. Like you and I, when we have a customer, they're like, hey, my fillet knife broke. You're like, great, send it back. I'm going to send you a new one. And you know what, I'm going to send you some stickers. And I think, like, thanks for the feedback. And, like, we're just willing to go the extra mile to keep them on board, because that's what it takes. The biggest thing that stuck out to me this year alone was poor customer service. Like, everywhere I called, whether it's an airline, whether it's something I ordered, it wasn't right, some sort of service. I feel like we have lost the touch solely. I think if a business went out and said, "What's your business model?" and they say, "I sell Hawaiian rolls." No, they sell whatever, just pick something random. They sell plastic forks. If they went out there and they have the best customer service, like they're pitching you on customer service, I think they'll succeed, because that's a way that they stand up from the pack. Because now it's like, no, we go out there and we put our customer, like, quite literally first. It's not like this, let's just put out a product and then just run away from the scene. It's actually, we care about it. We care about the people that work for the company. We care for every single employee. And then from there, we care about our customers the same way. So I think that's a huge benefit. And I don't even think it's a benefit. I think it's a necessity at this point to build a brand, build a product. So we've gotten a good overview at Sword at this point. The last thing about Sword, has there been a moment that you were like, I'm sure there's actually been a couple, but like, what's the one moment that you're like, I don't know if we're going to make it? Like, has there been a point where you're like, we're not going to get over this hurdle, we're not going to be able to break down this barrier? Has there been a moment like that yet?
Yeah, so last year in March, so I'm talking about 2021, we had just taken on a shipment that it was a $40,000 shipment that was all wrong, and there wasn't really a good way to truly remedy the problem.
Yeah.
So I kind of just went throughout the whole year thinking like, hey, you know what? Like, we're gonna be good, but you still have $40,000 in cash tied up. But for us, it's a significant investment in a product, and so we got through the whole year. We were great, but as it came time to continue to grow the business, it continued to be this Achilles heel, just not a great situation. And this past spring, I mean, our cash flow was getting to the zeros. I mean, we were hitting I remember looking at my bank account one time. I had $2,000. It was like $2,400. I had some vendors that still had to pay me, but I also still had other people that I had to pay, and I had a $9,000 credit card bill, because I'm just trying to make sure that I can get over this hump.
Yeah.
And I just put my faith in the fact that all my vendors would pay me, and everything ended up fine and dandy. But it's still I took that $2,400 all the way to made that continue to make money, pay off, make money, pay off, make money, pay off for a period of 6 months, 7 months, until we got through our busiest season, and then our cash income started coming back up. Yeah. But there was a moment there where I was trying to crunch all the numbers, seeing hey, is this really gonna work? Is this actually happening? And it ended up being fine. But for 6 months there, I lost sleep. I got anxious. I had times where I was depressed, and I thought man, you know what, my business may not work. And I'm one of those guys, my personality is you're not gonna fail, but you're also not gonna tell anybody you failed if you did. And so we had to get through that, and that time was tough. It's it all comes back down to cash. It's some of these businesses, they take, they could have the sexiest brand. They could be making $10 million a year, but in reality, they're actually there's no profit in that.
Yeah.
It all comes down to how well do you manage it, and I learned that lesson very, very early on, and I'm extremely grateful for that.
like with the, I always talk about, like, people are like, well, like, well, this investment and everything, what's like, you're like, well, I feel like I've gotten an MBA through this, I've gotten all these different accomplishments, even if tuna just tanked tomorrow. Like, you can't always just look at it and be like, it's a necessary plot line. And I just find it so intriguing because, like, we base success off of, like, what culture's idea of it is. Like, it's a success, the fact that you've brought Sword to this point already. It's a massive success. And it's so cool how that's shaped you and that continues to shape you. So I was just curious if there was, like, you know, because there's a lot of low moments. There's a lot of high moments when you're like, you go out there, you get this big contract, you go get, you know, this big retailer that has 50 locations. They're going to start carrying your product, and they're pumped about it. They're going to sell it. They're going to push it good. Like, how do you think those changes are that? How do you think the, I guess the way that you responded to that situation? How do you feel like that set you up for, like, the next 5 years?
I think the one thing that I've really learned a lot about and through the experiences that I went through is, like, how important it truly is to, like, know your business. And I mean, because you can go, let's just say, and I know you can relate to this, Kurt, but, like, you can willy-nilly it for 6 months.
Yeah.
And then, like, you know, you get to a point in your business where it's like, all right, like, I actually, like, I have to get organized. Like, I have to make sure that, like, certain things do take place.
Yeah.
And certain things are happening, because if you don't, like, it's going to catch up to you sooner or later. And I think for me, I've really learned that, like, when you start working on something, you need to look at it like, what is this going to look like in 5 years from now? Because I've started so many things where I'm like, actually, like, this can't even be updated. Like, I try to go in and I update it on a monthly basis, and I just end up, like, throwing the whole thing out the window and, like, starting over again, because I didn't have, like, the end in mind.
Yeah.
And so whenever I start something now, I start thinking, like, all right, what is this actually going to look like in a year from now, you know, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? And, like, is this going to be easy for me to keep up with? Because a lot of times, once you get into your grind, once you get into your hustle, you're not thinking about, like, oh, man, I want to go back and work on that, you know, that spreadsheet, or I want to go back and do that product development, or I want to go back and do, you know, whatever it is that actually matters for your business, because it's hard, it's difficult, and, like, we're creatures of habit, and, like, humans always want to take the easier path.
Yeah.
So I've really learned to, like, create the easier path at the very beginning, and then continue it on as the company matured.
Yeah. I mean, it took me 2 years with tuna to actually realize the difference between working in your company versus working on your company. Like, being able to say, hey, I have to do all the, you know, the manual labor to get this thing off the ground. But at some point, you have to take at least a step back and say, all right, but how do we grow this thing? Because, like, you can get so wrapped up in product development. You get so wrapped up in all these things. But then all of a sudden, you think, well, where do we sell it? Where are we going to go with it? You know, how big can we... in order for us to get the margins that we need, we have to scale it. So how do we scale it? Do we do it direct to consumer? Do we do it wholesale? Do we do a little bit of both? You have to, like, be able to step back and actually get a full picture of what the business is and what it's doing. Because, like, every single day, I mean, you probably put on a hat for 2 hours, you take that hat off, put another one on. Sometimes you're putting back on that same hat. I mean, you're wearing multiple hats every single day, and that is what's fun from it. Like, you learn so much. You get to do a lot of fun parts of the business, but there's a couple hats in there that aren't so fun. And like, what's the one hat that you have to wear that you just hate? Like, the one side of the business you're like, if I could just outsource that function and never deal with it again, it would be this.
The one thing that I would just love to offload, and partner up with Tuna On. Kurt will accept my offer. The day-to-day management of social media is one of the most time-consuming things that exists.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm slowly learning, because it's something that never ends, and it needs to be totally consistent. The brand imaging and messaging and marketing needs to be the same, and that's been one of the most difficult parts for me. Is like, I can do it for 6, 7, 8 months, but eventually it starts to become this full-time job.
Yeah.
And you forget that, like, hey, actually we need to like work on growing this business to another level.
Yeah.
But that's something that's never going to end. And eventually, once we have the cash flow for it, like, that's the next thing that I will offload to, whether it's an employee or an intern or even, an external agency.
Yeah. That's a good answer. I approve of that answer, because I equally hate it, especially in the maybe it will change. Maybe we'll listen to this in 2 years and we'll be like, oh, I remember that. The social media was horrible then. Like, the climate of social media right now is so bad. I mean, it is horrendous. Like, you do all this work and you might be able to get exposure to like 10% of your following, and even growing an actual following. But again, everything you just talked about is critical to brand image and being able to storytell. I'm a big, firm, strong believer in the fact that if you can't storytell your brand, it will not last. Because we live in America, which has literally every single product, 50,000 versions of it. You go to Best Buy and there's 1,000 big screen TVs. Like, which one am I going to get? Well, people figure out, hey, well, which one has been advertised to me? Which one's like sold this lifestyle that I want to live? Like, it displays the big game on Friday night that I want to watch. Like, and people identify with that. So you got to be able to storytell. You can't storytell at all, you're going to have a really hard time actually getting anything to our product. It's such a crowded space for everything. So, all right, last transition here. I saved the best for last. Probably one of the most interesting things, in my opinion, about you. And it makes it sound weird, actually, now that I'm saying it out loud. But I want you to talk about your hearing. Would you call it a disability?
If you ask the United States government, I am somebody with a severe disability.
Okay. So, let me clarify. Could you speak about your severe hearing disability? No, but seriously, it's an amazing thing. Because I can't imagine. I can't put myself in those shoes. I've never experienced that before. So, like, with you going about and building a brand, being a leader the way you are, like, because I already know, like, I study different things about people, and I'm like, I know why Steven is so intentional. I know how he can laser focus is because he unplugs his hearing aids and then he doesn't hear anything anymore. So, like, in all seriousness, how do you feel like that has brought, like, actual value to your life, not only just business but personally? And what are some things that you're like, hey, this would help me a lot? Because next week or this week you're going to get your second cochlear, and that's going to change a lot of things. So just tell kind of like the hurdles that you've dealt with. I mean, shoot, we lived in an era for a year where people wore face masks, and explain how you learned how to read lips and all that stuff.
Yeah, so for me, the hearing loss thing was, just to give everybody a brief background, I actually was born with the ability to hear. And so because I was born with the ability to hear, I kind of learned the basics of communication and at a young age. But when I was 5, like, I woke up one day. It and when you're younger, you don't really notice like what is happening to you.
Yeah.
It's just like there's no conscious. You just think that's normal for everybody, because like you don't have the ability to think like, oh, you know what? Like I actually can't hear as well today as I did yesterday, or like consecutive days of like, actually I'm not hearing as well, because you're just a kid. You're going through life, and like one day, like I woke up, and the only way that my parents actually found out that I wasn't hearing very well was because I turned the volume on the TV up to the max, which at the time was like 60. You know, it's these like big box TVs. It was like 1, 2, 3 all the way up to 60, and like it was at 60 when I turned it up, and I was trying to watch my morning cartoons, and you know, my parents came running in the room like, dude, why do you have the TV up so loud? Like it's like blasting right now. And then they understood that like I couldn't hear because my oldest brother also had a hearing loss and already had to go get hearing aids at the time. And so they, you know, it was kind of this moment of like, okay, we have a second son that has a hearing loss, and like it wasn't as much of a shock, I would bet, for the first one, but definitely like a shock at, you know, for anybody to say like, hey, you know, I have 2 sons that have a hearing loss. But my parents took a different approach to most, and I had the opportunity to go to a deaf school, or it's called the Texas School for the Deaf, and I would learn how to sign language. I would learn how to, you know, communicate that way. But my parents kind of said like, you know what, you're gonna go to the normal school. You're gonna learn how to, you know, you're just kind of gonna suck it up and learn how to like communicate with other people, learn how to hear, learn how to enunciate your words. And even to this day, you know, 29 years old, like I still enunciate things like the wrong way. And so kind of growing through that, as I was younger, I read lips. So like I cannot communicate with somebody or have a conversation with somebody without physically looking at them. And this was before I received a cochlear surgery, but like I had to look at somebody. So like first right out the gate, like my intentionality was there. Like there was never a moment where I wasn't being intentional with somebody, because I didn't have the luxury of, you know, looking to the side and still being able to tell like what somebody was saying.
Yeah.
And growing up, like going to school, like you can just imagine that. Like just imagine for a second right now that like you're sitting in class for 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, and you have to focus every single hour. Like,
yeah.
Or you're not going to pick up what the teacher said. Like you immediately fall behind. I couldn't even put my head down to take notes in class, because like if I put my head down to take notes, then I missed what the teacher said.
Yeah.
So like my body and my brain had to adapt to learn how to work differently. Like how are you going to overcome this problem, and how are you going to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success? And it made me this like incredible like subconscious problem solver, where like I started to live my life in a way that like I knew that, you know, if we had a guest speaker that day, like I had to show up to class, you know, 5-6 minutes early so that I could have a conversation with the guest speaker, and I could tell him like, hey, like I can't hear you, but like can you please make sure you don't turn your back to me?
Yeah.
So like those things that happen like subconsciously, to where like solving problems just became like my way of life. And I mean, I hate it for all you guys who don't have a hearing loss, that like solving problems is a little more difficult for y'all, but for me it actually became very natural, and like it turned my disability into what like a real ability, a real
superpower,
like strength. And like it's funny because I went to college, like I wasn't a straight A student in high school by any means. Like I went to school, went to sports practice, I expected to make all A's and B's. I think I made like a couple C's, but like it was fine.
I lived with C's, baby.
But then what happened when I got to college is like they told me I only had to focus for an hour at a time, 3 days a week. And I was like, oh, like this is easy. And I had peers of mine, who struggled through school and for various reasons. But for me, school was like just this. I showed up, I listened for an hour, I went and did all my homework, didn't have to worry about anybody, and like graduated. Like I put myself on a pedestal, but I did graduate with honors with a 3.9 GPA.
Wow.
So with a finance degree, I can toot my little horn. But anyways, as you get older, as you get into like corporate
We're gonna cut
world,
this out.
you get into the entrepreneurship. It helped because what a lot of people don't understand about entrepreneurship, it's all about solving problems.
100%.
Like you're solving a problem for the customer, you're solving a problem for your inside your business, you're solving problems online. Like, and there's just like I don't know what it is, a saying going around of like, oh, you just need to like fail fast, and you need to just fail so you can learn. Well, like the reality through all those failures, you're trying to solve problems.
Yeah.
And that's what entrepreneurship comes down to. Like, if you're a great problem solver, like there is a place in any business, in any industry, in any part of the world for you to make a living.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I kind of lost touch about my hearing, but that's how my hearing helped me get to the place that I am today.
Yeah, it really is amazing when people will be like, I didn't know Steven even had. I'm now finding that I feel like how I presented it was very insensitive. Like, what's your hearing disorder? Hearing loss sounds a lot more like politically correct, so I apologize for not saying the politically correct thing on this podcast. But I do feel like when people bring it up, I'm like, I immediately like, oh no, that's his superpower, because it really is. Like, I'm not comparing. I think it's apples and oranges here, but like I literally used to be in classes like they were like, you have reading disorder, like you can't read. I still struggle with reading, like to this day. And like you talked about kind of like some hardships, like even as a kid and stuff. Like that stuff really gets you thick skin and it prepares you for battle. Like you're like, it's solving problems over and over, but it's like you already have your big boy pants on because you're like, I've been doing this my whole life. I was probably picked on because of things, because I wasn't like maybe exactly like the other kids in our class or whatever, or maybe they said something I didn't hear it and they made a joke about it. Like, you're already prepared for it. And I think it's a really cool thing is when we like kind of do this upside down effect of like, actually I'm going to leverage that as a strength, and you 100% do that, dude. So anyways, thank you for sharing that. I think that's like a really cool thing for anyone that listens to this and watches this podcast, is that like you're an inspiring dude, whether you had perfect hearing or not. But I think that is just like an extra piece that like really like separates you from the pack, that like it's the cherry on top for sure. So, all right, it's freezing. We're going to wrap this baby up right now. Something new that we're going to do on the podcast, just to keep it a little fishy, is ask our guest if they were to identify themselves as a fish species, which fish would it be?
Man.
And for what purpose?
Here's the thing. My mind immediately goes to a wahoo because that's my favorite fish to catch. But the thing is, it's like, that's not the baddest fish in the sea. And like,
it's one of them.
I want to identify as like the baddest fish. And I think if I could identify as any, it would probably be a lizardfish.
Lurks in the sandbar, comes up and nibbles on some scraps from time to time.
But no, I would say my favorite thing is I definitely think something I identify as a bluefin tuna. Like these things like are Volkswagen Beetles, and they go around just like doesn't matter what it is, they're just gonna freaking destroy it. And it's something out there. It's like a tuna, and specifically the bluefin species. I mean, they travel thousands of miles every year throughout their journey, and you know they've learned how to adapt to like this new like shipping routes, a container ship coming around. Like they've learned how to adapt like to the new environment, a warming ocean, and that's something that's inspiring because they continue to make this same trek, like with full faith that that they're gonna find food and they're gonna find a place to spawn, and that's just what I would totally aspire to be, like totally traveling around everywhere, eating whatever I wanted to eat, and just living that good life as a bluefin tuna.
Getting as big as a Volkswagen Beetle.
Yeah, just getting fat, some fat in my belly.
That was a great fish to pick. I would have thought you were going to say wahoo first, but it makes sense that you picked bluefin tuna. So, all right, it's freezing. We're going to wrap this baby up. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Choose Your Nature podcast. Steven, love you, brother.
It's been great. Thanks for having me.